Okay. So
Recording in progress.
let's share this. Cool. So what I want us to do is going to be more practice-oriented this time. I have made a written summary of 2 full BP debates, and I want us to try and judge them together. The way we will do this is going to be step by step, meaning we start with comparing the top half, and then when we make decisions, we gradually start fitting bottom half in as we go down the bench. This is also, by the way, how I would recommend you guys judge during an actual debate. You want to already have an idea of who is winning on top half before bottom half teams get into the debate, so that you know how to place them relative to what's happening. And as I hope you will see, it will also help you identify how to assess the value of bottom half's contribution if you already identify the key contingencies on top half. So this is a summary of a top half on the motion: this House, as the European Union, would create a standing army. OG runs the argument that a European army will deter Russia from further expansion into Eastern Europe. It gives the reasons that, 1, all countries in the EU sharing all of their resources, intelligence, and manpower should allow for a very powerful army and thus a very deterring army. Secondly, Russia knows it is enough to attack just one country in Europe to trigger the army of all of them, so it won't dare get near the weaker countries that are closer to its border. Thirdly, it is a military that can go across borders throughout Europe, and so it is also very mobile and very easy to send its supply and soldiers and so on. Hence, it's likely to be very powerful and thus more deterring. Fourthly, each country in the EU has its unique comparative advantage. Some of them have stronger technology and can contribute in intelligence and in weaponry. Some of them have more willing manpower who don't have better alternatives of occupation and are willing to stand on the front line, and so on. When you combine all of them together, you will get an even more deterring military. Lastly, European countries face no immediate threat from any other actor other than Russia. So Russia will have to know this army will concentrate all of its power against Russia alone if tensions arise. All of those reasons contributing to the army being very deterring. Are there questions on the OG argument? Do you have clarifications to make on it? Because it is a summary. All right. OO, in direct clash to OG, says a European army will trigger Russian aggression. It will be antagonizing to Russia. Firstly, it is just on the border of some of Russia's strategic allies, because countries like Belarus and so on share border with other European countries. Secondly, there's likely to be a lot of news and images of the army, its drills, how it's growing in power, all of this causing fear and unease in Russia, which will have to trigger a reaction. Thirdly, Russia knows it can't win it in the long run. The EU is technologically superior and richer, so it has to act. Fourthly, it also knows that this army will likely be backed by NATO and the US, making it even more intimidating. Russia cannot let this slide, especially when Russia knows, just like OG conceded, the EU has no other immediate threat. So it knows it's meant to be against it in particular. It has to act. It cannot just leave it and seem like it's doing nothing. Lastly, it takes time to build an army. Russia will take advantage of the momentum and strike now to prevent it before it gets too powerful. Are there any questions or clarifications on the OO argument? Yes, Banshaj?
Just a clarification. If we assume that an army is being created, is it reasonable to assume that while the army is being created, there's going to be a certain level of collaboration between two countries? It looks like while the process of army is being created, if one country, say, gets attacked, other countries won't wait but will intervene in whatever capacity they can.
Assume this was not said in the debate.
Okay.
What I want you guys to do now, take 2 minutes of silent thinking in which I want you to reach some conclusion or an idea of which side you are leaning for. And then we'll start discussing it together. Take 2. Okay, let's start chatting. With the raise of your hand, who thinks OG is winning the topic? Okay, with the raise of your hands, who thinks OO is winning the topic? I have counted 2 hands for OG. We now have 3 for OO. I take it that majority of you don't think. I have a more interesting question. Why is the top half difficult to read? What's the problem with the team's analysis? Both of them give a lot of reasons. It's a well-analyzed case. Why is it so hard to judge? Anyone has any idea?
I think it has largely been centralized towards this idea of Russia only, whereas multiple ideas, as in what are the individual incentives of European Union countries, could have been significantly more explained.
Sure, many things could have been more explained, but the arguments themselves are fairly explained, and I'd say more than that. They are well explained and directly clashing. It should be easy to compare them, no? One of them has to be more compelling than the other. What's the problem? Anusha?
I feel that the harms given by O are more short term, while OG has an edge in the long run, so it becomes hard to compare here.
Okay.
Also, on
Any other thoughts?
I think O's case of retaliation, there needs to be significant analysis on how strong of this retaliation is going to be. Is it deterrent enough to like stop EU's plan even to create a army in future or something? Because they claim that retaliation is going to exist in the short run, but there's no specific analysis on why is this going to be so massive that European Union will never try again to create an army or something. So I don't see the efficacy of that retaliation.
Okay. Let's try and maybe use the classical three metrics we discussed, last time to assess how good and compelling an argument is. We said likelihood, importance, and relevance. Let's go one by one. Do you think either OG or OO prove significantly more likelihood of what they're claiming? Any thoughts? What do they prove is likely? Anupriya, I see your hand is raised.
I think O's likelihood is a bit better than OG's likelihood because they tell us that Russia's retaliation is going to be more for the simple likelihood that it's bordering a European state. OG comparatively goes ahead and tells that countries share resources, intelligence, manpower. However, how this happens, whether they have their incentives aligning with one another, is never shown in likelihood. So, like on that comparative, on a preliminary basis, I'm siding with O over OG in this case.
Okay. Anyone has different thoughts?
Based on the context of EU, is it likely to assume that they have a strong economic cooperation between them? Which means that even if we like preemptively think about it, if one country's like autonomy or something is being harmed, European Union as a whole will face the consequences of it, either economically or some way. So it's unlikely to isolate one country and say that. So it's based on that previous assumption of how European Union works. It's likely to assume that they have the equal incentives and comparative advantages. So on likelihood, it's more likely simply because even if one country in the border is being effective, ripple effects are going to exist in based on the fact that it's more of an economic union.
All right. I want to intervene for a sec and posit that there is a very unfortunate but very common theme occurring on this top half comparison, which you will notice frequently when you do comparisons of teams directly clashing each other, and what happens when they do competing analysis, or what you would know from Harish's video from the Judging Academy in the name Competing Rebuttal. They give competing reasons on the same clash without engaging each other's reasons. And both of them sound quite plausible. And we're left to decide which is true, because they can't both be true at the same time, or can they? Here, I want you to take a step backwards and differentiate between what teams claim they prove and what teams actually prove. Likelihood is not going to help us here. Importance is not going to help us here. Relevance is. The reason is the following. Majority of the analysis of both teams is not on the relevant question. They have a lot of analysis and they have a very clear, obvious impact. It's very clear that what they're claiming is likely and important. However, OG never proves deterrence. What OG proves is the army will be scary. Similarly, OO also proves this army will be scary. The actual clash between them is what is Russia's likely reaction to threat. And this is where you want to understand where the comparison is going. Just trying to decide who gives more compelling reasons will not advance you farther, because they are not actually in disagreement. They agree with each other that this will be a scary army. If you'll notice, many of their reasons are directly the same reasons, like Russia knowing that it has to be against it, hence it must be a threat. The question then only becomes, who does a better job connecting their analysis, not just to it is threatening, but to show the likely reaction Russia has to threat is consolidation and not attacking, or aggression and attacking. Is this point clear? Do you have questions on it? So if it is clear, take another silent minute. Yes, I was asked in chat if I can repeat the last sentence. What we are looking for in this comparison is not who has the better analysis in a vacuum, because both of them, for majority of their speeches, analyze the same thing. They analyze an EU army is scary, is threatening. What we are looking for is the relevance, linking it to Russian reaction. Does Russia respond to threat by consolidation and deterrence, or does it respond to threat by aggression? Any questions on what I just said? Is it clear? Okay, if it is clear, take one more silent minute, go over these speeches again in their max, and try to identify anything you can find that helps us resolve this question. How is Russia likely to respond? Take a minute. Okay, let's chat. So, anyone thinks they found something that can help us resolve this deadlock?
I think OG and O both have a competing claim where OG says that Russia knows that it's even if attacking one country means triggering. So OG is clearing deterrence on this fact that Russia knows that triggering one country means triggering all of them. Whereas O says that, well, O's claim that, well, Russia will take advantage of the momentum stands on this assertion that it takes time to build an army. So the key question here becomes, how transient is it? If it's going to take time to create an army, which is likely from all the analysis, because even in OGVC's argumentations were saying that creating an army will lead to something. OG never claims directly that there is a certain level of collaboration between them at present to respond to the immediate threat. If that question is answered, then it's likely to buy on O. But if it's not answered and we don't buy the claim that it takes time to, well, create some sort of military collaboration, then OG's claim of deterrence still stands. Probably.
Okay. Any other thoughts? So personally, I am in fact leaning OO precisely because of this last mechanism. I would make it on like 1 speaker point margin because these two are doing a terrible job engaging and making this call way closer than it needs to be. But absent any refutations, it does stand that intuitively, if we don't intervene, if we ask what the globally informed voter thinks, if OG does not respond, building an army takes time. It's not an immediate process. Given that, and given both sides agree Russia will be threatened, they only disagree on what its likely reaction to threat is, the most compelling analysis I got from any team so far is Russia's likely reaction is to take advantage of a momentum. It knows it will be threatening in the future, but it is not yet threatening. So now is the perfect time to act and attack. Is this great analysis? Absolutely not. On face value, it seems like both sides have great analysis. They don't. Their analysis in majority of it is off clash. This is why this call will end up being decided, despite all of the plentiful analysis given here, effectively on one mechanism. And this is the important power of relevance, which I feel like goes a bit undermined in too many calls. I think often judges judge a bit on vibes and what feels like the more compelling case and the better analysis. The problem is, it can take you so far when rooms are very obvious. But A, the more power paired rooms are, the more proximate they will be in the level of analysis. And B, analysis, even if it's very, very thorough, isn't always very good. And the importance of determining whether an analysis is compelling as pertaining to the motion is not just assessing how much quantitatively analysis was given, but is it directed in the right place or is it misdirected? The best way to avoid mistakes on such calls when teams are directly clashing and there's a lot of competing material and you're not sure if they actually meet their burdens, is ask yourself the following question, which is the question that targets relevance. What do teams agree on and what do they disagree on? Anything teams agree on, you can ignore. You can take it immediately out of the debate. You can consider any analysis on what they agree on as off clash. Because if they agree, there's no argument. These teams agree. This is a threatening arm. The question is what they disagree on. They disagree on the likely reaction. And once we are able to map that, we make our lives significantly easier because we no longer have to address all of the 5 or 6 mechanisms each team has. Only the few relevant ones. Are there questions on this comparison and the process we just did? Okay. Let's bring in bottom half. And this will be a nice experiment in assessing vertical extensions, which is a common question many of you had. CG comes up with an argument bearing the exact same headline as OG. a European army will deter Russia from further expansion into Eastern Europe. The reasons they provide are the following. One, Russia knows the EU has no imperialistic aspirations. So it knows they won't strike first, but only act in self-defense. Hence, Russia's incentive is to not attack, but consolidate and keep things peaceful to avoid the threat. Secondly, Russia is currently very weak as a result of its war with Ukraine and the global sanctions. It means that it is unlikely to try and attack a new front right now when it's already struggling. By the time it grows stronger back after all of the harms it took from the war in Ukraine, it will be too late, because by then the army would have been formed. And per the analysis both top half teams give, once it's formed, it will be powerful enough to beat it. Thirdly, the cost of war with an EU army would be too big to risk it. Even if Russia is antagonized by this move and would want to attack, they will not enter a losing war after having already learned their lessons with Ukraine and the significant harms it can give them. Even if they are antagonized, they are not stupid. They know that this is a war they would lose. Ignore CO for a sec. We'll address CO in a second. Where do you feel CG places relative to the top half? Do you think they are in a good position or in a bad position?
It is
Okay,
a
with
good.
the rest of your hands, who thinks CG takes it over OO? Say, let's start from that. Who thinks CG places below OO? Okay, majority of you would be correct. In this case, CG places above opening opposition. Does anyone want to explain why? And then I'm going to ask you some tough questions on it to try and challenge this a bit.
OO's claim depends on the efficacy of retaliation, that it's going to be sudden and it's going to be strong enough. CG is able to prove A, that it's not going to be sudden retaliation because Russia's resources are spread thin. And B, it's not going to be effective enough because, well, again, Russia's resources are spread thin because of the war with Ukraine as of now.
I have a question for a sec. Say that you wouldn't see OO and you don't know what OO said. And we were to judge OG versus CG in a vacuum. And we hadn't had the discussion we had earlier on OG versus OO. Who seems to have the better analysis between OG and CG? I'll do the page up again so you can see OG's analysis. Who seems to have better analysis in a vacuum if we ignore OO? What do you think?
CG has a better analysis because, well, OG's case is centralized around this idea of how would the army of Europe look, EU look like, whereas CG is engaging on how would like European army look like, and also how likely is Russia to retaliate or not retaliate. So it's OG's case is a bit more isolated than CG, at least in terms of engagement with Russia and what the Russian incentives are.
Yeah, I want to make 3 quick observations for a sec. The first one is OG probably has more rigorous analysis than CG. If we're just judging based on the quantity and extent of analysis, OG has more mechanisms and many of them are more compelling at the point that they are trying to prove that this will be a very threatening army. It also makes sense and will usually be the case because OG has two constructive speeches, CG only has one. If we ignore relevance as a criteria, there is no reason for us to think that the CG analysis is better. Relevance, therefore, should play into how we evaluate same bench comparisons as well. The second observation I want to make is the merit of realizing the important contention on top half before evaluating the bottom half. Once we realized what is the area of disagreement in top half, it becomes so much easier to assess how CG plays into the picture. Because if we didn't have that, and we would just have more competing analysis, here are 3 new reasons on the clash of where do you get more Russian aggression, what would we do with it? How would we decide that this is the better analysis? But because we already reached the conclusion that top half agrees on this being a scary army, and therefore the only point in disagreement is the sub-clash that CG had the best analysis on, how does Russia respond to this threat? Then it becomes very easy to give CG their deserved first. One last observation I want to make on CG before we discuss CO. Had OO disagreed that this would be a threatening military, had OO challenged and said that this would probably not be perceived as scary to Russia, would CG still win OG? What do you think?
Just a clarification. Are we still considering that the cost of war with an EU army would be too big?
What do you mean?
I just want to clarify it for myself. The cost of war is more on rhetorical ways by saying that, well, European army is superior and hence we'll fail, or it's like, what exactly is the meaning of cost of war with European army, EU army that CG is claiming about?
So this is basically where I was going with this. CG is, in a sense, contingent or derivative of OG analysis. CG doesn't give any independent reason whatsoever for why this military will be strong and threatening. And hence, absent the OG analysis, there is no reason why the cost of war with the EU would be too big, or why Russia, or why by the time the military grows stronger, it will be too late to attack. It's all assumed that this is a strong military. They never prove it. So why do they still win OG? Is this a triangle situation? Because they win OO, shouldn't they lose to OG because they are derivative? What do you think?
Again, that is when we are assuming that O is going to reject it. So at least for this case, even if it is a bit okay, if we see that both sides are agreeing, CG has no reason to again like state something that has been conceded both sides. If there was a negation, probably a different analysis.
And this is again bringing the point on relevance. And relevance is very much impacted by what teams choose to concede and what they choose to argue on in the debate. An argument can't be relevant or irrelevant in a vacuum. Relevance is always pertaining to the debate that happened. In this case, there is a full-on concession that the army is going to be strong and threatening, and hence CG does not have the burden to prove it. In a different debate, it would have this burden, and it would be derivative of OG if it would not give independent reasons for it. This is important for many vertical extensions. Teams often fill in a missing link on top half, while ignoring that top half had links that they themselves did not have. We should apply judgment and common sense as judges, and ask ourselves which link is more important. And the answer would usually be which link is more contested. If the link that OG already proved is considered in the debate, it's fine for CG to be derivative of it. If it is contested, then CG can't get away with filling in one link while being derivative and OG for another. Is that clear? Okay. Lastly, let's discuss CO. CO attempts a somewhat similar strategy. They want to show what the likely reaction from Russia is as well. And their analysis is Putin is irrational. He is not a rational actor. Most of the debate asserted Russia to act rational. Hence, we will prove that threatening him will not work and will not be an effective deterrence. He is still likely to try and expand simply because he's crazy. They give several reasons to believe this statement. One, he thought he could take over a country as huge as Ukraine in 3 days. Two, he surrounds himself with yes men who tell him he can do anything because they are afraid to tell him otherwise. Hence, his own strategists and advisors will tell him he can take over Europe undeterred and that this is not a military to be afraid of. Three, he incarcerated, assassinated, or silenced any criticism of his regime for years. So no one is left to raise concerns and warn about the risk and suggest that maybe you're not able to win this war. Four, Putin views the West as weak. He rationalized to himself and to his people all this time that Western leaders are spineless. He won't fear a European army. He thinks that they are not a threat to his Russian soldiers. He will attack. Take a minute to think how CO places in this debate, and then we will discuss it together. Okay, let's chat. Who thinks CO is likely to place high in this debate, like first or second? All right. Who thinks CO is likely to place low in this debate? We have a split here. This is indeed what I intended. That is a tricky one, trying to fool you. A volunteer who thinks CO is likely to place high in the debate and wants to explain why. Yes, Anupriya?
I think CO places high for me in the debate because at any point of time, they established to me that this power leader who's actually responsible for making decisions, they in a way extend upon it, but they extend in an extension that is substantially well proven. So, like, they explained to me that, hey, Russia's response is going to be aggressive, and why this aggressiveness is something that's to be fearful of. I think we discussed this also in a degree that if there is a sort of danger that we're portraying that does pose up, like, that shows more harm occurring with a lesser degree of explanation, I think we need to give it more precedence. So, like, when the degree of harm of Russian aggression is there, even if it's like not well detailed, but the harm is something that's substantial and needs to be looked after, I think for that sole reason, like, CO needs to have importance.
Okay. Anyone who thinks CO is likely to play slow in the debate and wants to answer and present the opposite case?
I think to a larger degree, when CG is able to, CG claims that, well, Russia is currently weak, even if Putin is like reckless, that doesn't mean that Russia all of a sudden is strong, which means that even if, which means that on a countrywide level, Russia is still weak and not going to like attack right now. Even if it does, CG's claim that Russia has already been weak substantially says that whatever military threat is there, they're able to take. But secondly, even if all of that is true, that, well, Putin is reckless and he's going to attack, on terms of relevancy, it makes more sense for you, considering that Putin is reckless, to go and create a standing army no matter what the consequence. Because if he's going to attack, he'll attack today, he'll attack tomorrow, day after tomorrow. So if he is so irrational, why would you just not create an army altogether?
Okay. I think the last part of what you said is actually quite important. I'm going to claim that CO is fourth in this debate. With a bit more work, they could be first. But currently, they shouldn't win any other team. And there are two main reasons for this. First is what I believe was in the end of what, I'm sorry, I'm terrible with noting names, but what you just said, for lack of a better memory. CO is not specific to the debate in any way. CO gives us reasons why Putin wants to attack any day. This is again a point about relevance. CO's analysis is great. I think they prove compellingly that Putin is crazy. Why would an army trigger this in any way? Why is he not attacking Europe now? Why would not building an army prevent it? Everything we get from CO are just reasons why, by their own words, he will not perceive the army as a threat at all. So the army changes nothing. What they wanted to do is explain why Putin's irrationality combined with the threat of a European army would lead to an irrational response. But that is not what they analyzed. The second thing I will observe is CO is very knifey towards OO here. OO, throughout their case, concede and very much rely on the premise that Russia will respond rationally. It will take more work and nuance for CO to compel us that they can claim Russia to be an irrational actor whilst not being in direct tension with their opening. But this is, I think, more resolvable. The first thing is the bigger problem. CO lacks connection to the motion. CO gives analysis for why Russia wants to attack without giving analysis for why it will not want to attack on their side. Are there questions on this? Okay. So hopefully this drill was effective in establishing the importance of relevance as a criteria, as well as understanding how we assess vertical extensions and what they need to prove and what they don't need to prove. We have a second example. I will say we will not have time to go through all of it in depth. So I suggest we can do a top half comparison now. And I can send you for homework if you want the challenge, the bottom half, to try and pick your brain at. So the second example follows the motion. This house believes that governments should abandon the strategy of decapitation in fighting terrorism. This is an example of a more matter-dumpy kind of debate. The first debate was more, everyone is very one point, let's analyze it very well. Here, intentionally, I choose a debate where teams gave multiple points. OG gave the following 3 points. Firstly, decapitation is highly ineffective. This is because it is extremely easy for a terror organization to hide one person, the leader. It's just one person. And terror organizations concentrate a lot of the resources to hide that one person. So we don't really have a good chance at catching them, and we're just wasting resources. They also note, panel, this point is logically prior to anything else in the debate. If decapitation is ineffective, all other harms or benefits of any other team cannot stand without engaging us. Secondly, decapitation only leads to worse leaders. This is because someone else will try and replace the leader as the first reason. Secondly, this someone is likely to be worse and more violent. Thirdly, they are also likely to want to avenge the previous leader and thus become more aggressive. And fourthly, they will be paranoid because the last leader was just assassinated, and thus they will respond more harshly and irrationally. Third point, decapitation imposes collateral harm. Usually terror organization leaders surround themselves by human shields, so killing them inevitably harms innocent people. Questions on the OG case and its verifications? Okay.
Just a clarification, decapitation is like assassination of that particular individual, right?
Yes. A targeted killing of a terror organization leader.
Okay.
OO gives responses and then one argument. The rebuttal is, 1, it's easy to effectively decapitate, precisely because it's just one person. It is very easy to catch just one person when Western militaries concentrate their resources on it. Secondly, in response to collateral harm, decapitation actually leads to less collateral harm because the alternative is full-on war, which harms more people in the process. Constructive point. Decapitation significantly harms terror organizations. They give 4 reasons for this. 1, the leader often has a cult of personality. They are unique, not so easily replaceable. They have built their fan base throughout their life. Secondly, there is likely to be disagreement on who the next leader should be. Different people are likely to fight over who deserves to be the new leader. And this would lead to splitting in terror organizations and weakening them. Thirdly, there is often not even an alternative prepared at all for anyone to replace them, and then the organization will remain with no leader. This is because leaders are paranoid of someone trying to take their seat, so they don't allow anyone who's promising and shows any potential or charisma to grow under their wing because they don't want a threat. And fourthly, even if a future leader is found and agreed on, they will be so deterred from acting because they know they could be the next one to be decapitated. Take 2 minutes. I want you to try and assess who you think is winning the top half. Okay. Let's bring it to discussion. Who thinks OG is winning? Raise your hand. Okay. Who thinks OO is winning? Nice, we have another split. Who wants to defend OG winning and explain why? Any volunteer? Yes, Dipshika?
First, I think when OG talks about this person, like this is decapitation as a strategy would be like it would be extremely difficult to actually assassinate this person because of they surround themselves with human shields, etc. When OO revert this point by saying that it would actually like it is like when they talk about this comparative that they should go ahead with decapitation because the other alternative is war, they don't exactly prove why there is nothing like in between, why there's either decapitation or like war. Also, another thing like I have a little doubt over is since the motion is this house believes that governments should do something or not, I'm a little unsure why OO is running on the constructive that decapitation significantly harms terror organizations. Like, why should, as government, I should go ahead and care about the harms that this provides to terror organizations?
Okay. Anyone wants to defend OO taking it over OG?
I think to a larger degree, OG's central claim is that whoever is going to be replaced, they are going to be much more aggressive. And O kind of accepts that, well, hey, someone else is going to come in, but it's not just going to be one person, it's going to be a lot of people. And they give analysis by saying that these leaders are paranoid, which is something that even OG says that, well, leaders inherently are paranoid, which means I'm likely to believe that they are not going to let anyone else breed under them. Which means that since I don't have a strong person who's going to, well, say, be their alternative, it's likely to believe that there's going to be a lot of infighting. So on the analysis that both sides agree that replacing is going to happen, and it's more likely to believe that and no leader wants themselves to be replaced, so they're not going to train anyone else. It means that infighting is, as a government, I would want that, well, like other terror organizations resort to infighting or something to a larger degree if it weakens them.
Let's try and break it down. I think this is, if put to structure, a very easy call, in fact. I would make the margin between OO and OG, and I'm not telling you who I think is winning yet, quite large. However, I think without clear structure, it's hard to reach this otherwise clear call. The reason it's hard is because there are a lot of pieces here and a lot of moving parts that engage on very different metrics. So let's take a step back for a sec. Can you identify the clashes on top half? There are 3 of them. I think if you look for them, you should be able to identify them quite clearly.
First clash is, well, how the replacement is going to look like. Where Gov says it's not going to be effective and probably more like aggressive towards government, op claims infighting.
Okay, so first clash is who will be the new leader, if at all? What will be the tomorrow, the future of the terror organization without this leader? How will they cope? Will they become better or worse? Cool. What's a second clash?
Is decapitation effective or not? Again, one-liner analysis from both sides. So no specific
Yes,
reason.
do we have feasibility?
Yeah, feasibility.
Can we feasibly catch them? What's the third clash?
Impact on other stakeholders.
Yeah, collateral harm. Which side has more collateral harm? Let's go one by one. Firstly, the future leader. Who thinks this specific clash, the question of will the next leader be better or worse, or will the organization after decapitation be better or worse, is won by OG? Who thinks it's won by OO? Beautiful. I want you to notice something important for a sec. We had a split, a disagreement on who is winning top half. But when we divide it into clashes, we are able to reach a consensus very quickly on who wins a specific clash. This will be also important for your deliberation process. When you want to be efficient and be able to reach an agreement fast in little time, the way to do it is to map what you agree on and what you disagree on. Do you agree on who's winning each clash? Do you agree on what's the most important clash? Because oftentimes, if you'll try to convince each other without understanding where the area of disagreement is, you'll be wasting time explaining things the other side agrees with you on. Those who think OG is winning agree that OO takes this clash. Second one, feasibility. Who thinks OG wins the clash of feasibility? Who thinks OO wins the clash of feasibility? Okay. Because we are short on time, otherwise I would do more of a discussion on this, because we are already a bit behind time. I'll just give the quick answer to this. No one wins the clash on feasibility. I think many judges would go with OO on feasibility. I think these judges would be probably wrong. Both sides give competing and entirely symmetric assertions on feasibility. OG says in one line, it's very easy to hide one guy. I mean, it's just one guy. OO says, so easy to catch one guy. I mean, it's just one guy. And that's pretty much the extent of this analysis. And OG says, sure, concentration of resources of terror organizations. OO says concentration of resources of militaries. Maybe if one of them were to analyze which has the more resources to concentrate or prioritizes this issue more or whatnot, we would have a break of this deadlock. But this is entirely symmetric. What is important for me to note here, and a common mistake I suspect many judges would make, OO doesn't get to win this clash just because they said their one-liner later. The part where they say precisely because it's just one guy is something many judges would interpret as OO flipping OG. This is not what's going on here. OO is not flipping the OG analysis. The OG analysis stays standing. It's very easy to hide just one person for terror organizations. Simultaneously, we would get a concentration of resources of militaries. Which is more important? I don't know. The fact that OO runs a competing rebuttal does not make it a flip. It does not mean that because they said it second, they win. The OG competing claim originally still stands as well. So this clash is probably a wash. What about collateral harm? What do you think? Who thinks OG takes collateral harm? Who thinks OO takes collateral harm? Okay, I think there are multiple valid answers on this one. I would probably go with OG winning collateral harm, but there are different ways to read it. This is one of the more subjective areas that would depend on what do you think the average informed voter is willing to sleep in for OO. OG have analysis on why there is some collateral harm on their side. OO assert that the counterfactual would be full-on war without explaining why, and then that the collateral harm of a full-on war would be much worse. Now, this would be a classic case of a disagreement where one team has more likelihood and the other has more impact. Surely, if OO prove the counterfactual is a full-on war, their impact is larger. More collateral harm in a war is fairly intuitive. That much does not need analysis. But they don't prove a full-on war will happen. Personally, I would go with OG on this clash, because I don't think it is trivial to the globally informed voter that wars and decapitation serve the exact same purpose. They can happen at the same time. The US did decapitations at the same time as it did wars and drones in the Middle East. However, if you're willing to believe OO has at least some plausibility, that in at least some of the cases, there is a trade-off, even if not in all of them because they don't prove likelihood, it could be valid to say, even if only on some cases OO is correct that this is the alternative, on utility, because these cases have so much more lives involved, OO should take this clash. Hence, I do think this is one where probably both calls are legitimate. However, regardless, I don't think we have to answer this question. I think OO wins this top half comparison because they win the bigger clash on the impact decapitation has immediately on terror organizations. The reason for this is one that I feel goes a bit ignored in many comparisons of competing clashes. I don't think the impact of this clash is trivially more important than the impact of collateral harm. Of course not. I just think the OO analysis on it is so much better. And this is important. I think judges are good at comparing extensive analysis and who had the better analysis inside a clash, but forget to do it between clashes. The reason we all had a consensus on OO taking this clash is because it's clear to all of us that OG asserts the replacement would be someone more violent without explaining why. And OO gives very good reasons for why it's not so easy to replace a reigning leader and will probably very much harm the terror organization. Even without an active weighing between the clashes, and even if we think that OG wins the collateral harm clash, and I think they probably do, OG wins their clash on this margin. It's small. They show some collateral harm. They give a bit of likelihood for why this is the case. And they get away with OO also having a competing claim on this, which, albeit does not prove their counterfactual, at the very least mitigates it a fair bit. So they win this clash, but on a small extent. OO wins their clash on a much larger extent. So important to take from this, we compare between clashes similar to how we compare between arguments, not just on bottom lines, not just on impact, not just on which clash in abstract is more important, but also on the extent to which each clash was won. If a clash had significantly better analysis and did not have significantly lower impact, it probably should win, just like an argument that had a significantly better analysis, even if it has a competing impact and is not weighed against the original argument, should win. Are there questions on this?
I just have one question. I think it's more of a misapplication of this idea of a common informed global citizen on those lines. Like as an average person, I have this bias of thinking that probably Western militaries have better resources than a small terror organization or even a large terror organization when we compare it with Western militaries. Now, the point I'm confused is, sure, I will not insert myself into the debate and like give it to OO, but it's similar on the lines when OG claims that, well, someone is likely to be more worse and more violent. I mean, I'm not crediting OG for that because I need more analysis. Whereas when OO makes the claims of saying that, well, Western military is more strong, by logic, I know that they are. So,
Hold
to
on.
what extent can I intervene?
Hold on, did OO say the Western military is more strong?
I mean, just in terms of, okay, that's again inserting a lot in this debate, but still on the lines that, well, militaries in general having a lot more resources, researchers, and even funding from government than a terror
This is a
organization.
good question. It is a good question. I don't think it would be a bad call to say that OO takes this clash for this reason. Personally, I do think it would be the wrong call for the following reason. As I explained in the last call, what I want you guys to develop is not a manual to micromanage your judgment, but a judging philosophy that helps you answer complicated questions. If we go back to our first principles, our 3 pillars of adjudication, we want to be comparative in everything we do, which means if we insert ourselves, we have to do it symmetrically for both sides to the same extent. To the same degree that I can think of an OO framing that says Western militaries have more resources, I can also symmetrically think of an OG framing that says, but terror organizations concentrate their resources more on their leader because Western armies have other priorities as well. Terror organizations have the priority of their leader. Both of them sound equally intuitive. Both of them were not said in the debate. To the extent that I'm willing to step in and give in OO an intuitive link, the next question I ask myself to make sure that I'm interventionist in a fair way is, with the same degree of interventionism, could I also think of a symmetric response to OG? If the answer is yes, then I'm not making this intervention asymmetrically in favor of OO. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay. If any of you wants for homework, we will not discuss this now because we are already behind schedule, but you can take a screenshot now of this slide, which has the bottom half extensions of this debate. Note that in this case, there is also a POI from OO to CG, because I also want to see how you evaluate it. Take a screenshot, try and think in your own free time how you would evaluate CG and CO, how you would place them relative to both top half teams, and we can chat about it in the next call. Are there any questions on anything we discussed today?